The massive obsidian chamber hummed with low energy as the Zephyrian Empire's most powerful leaders gathered around the central war table. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as holographic displays flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow across their angular faces. Commander Vextar stood at the head of the table, his 6 arms crossed behind his back as he studied the data streaming across the screens. His crimson eyes, like burning coals in his dark skull, narrowed with growing displeasure. The hologram showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy's outer rim territories. Tiny green dots marked human settlements, and there were far too many of them. Each dot represented a world that had once been empty space, now teeming with human activity. Ships moved between the colonies like busy insects, carrying supplies, people, and resources back and forth across vast distances. "Look at this," Vextar said, his voice carrying the sharp edge of disgust. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke, a sound that other species found deeply unsettling. These humans spread like some kind of disease. Just 2 cycles ago, there were 12 human colonies in this sector. Now there are 29. General Croth, his second in command, moved closer to examine the display. His own crimson eyes reflected the holographic light as he traced the expansion patterns with one clawed finger. The humans had been smart about their growth, choosing worlds rich in resources and positioned along important trade routes. They were not expanding randomly like many younger species did. They had a plan. 17 new colonies in just 2 cycles, Croth confirmed, his voice heavy with concern. At this rate, they will control the entire Kepler sector within 10 cycles. Our mining operations on the asteroid fields will be completely surrounded by human territory. The other members of the War Council shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Kepler sector provided nearly 30% of the rare minerals that powered their starships and weapons. Without access to those resources, the Zephyrian Empire would face serious problems. Their military might depended on those materials, and their entire economy was built around controlling key resource points throughout the galaxy. Vextar's expression grew darker as he considered their options. Military conquest would be expensive and time-consuming. The humans had proven surprisingly resilient in past conflicts, and their technology was advancing rapidly. A direct war might drag on for decades, costing precious resources and lives. There had to be a better way to deal with this growing threat. "We cannot allow this expansion to continue," he declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded star fleets for over 2 centuries. "The humans must be stopped before they become too powerful to control." General Croth nodded in agreement, but his expression showed concern. Direct military action would be costly. The humans have shown they can fight back effectively. Their ships are primitive compared to ours, but they have numbers and they fight with unexpected creativity. Other council members began to murmur among themselves. The Zephyrians had encountered humans before in smaller conflicts, and they had learned to respect their unpredictable nature. Humans did not follow the same logical patterns that most species used in warfare. They took risks that seemed insane, showed up where they were not expected, and somehow found ways to turn disadvantages into victories. Vextar raised one of his hands for silence, and the chamber fell quiet immediately. A slow smile spread across his face, revealing rows of sharp teeth that had evolved for tearing flesh. He reached forward and activated a different section of the holographic display. The peaceful star map disappeared, replaced by something far more sinister. A new image materialized in the center of the room. It was a creature of pure nightmare, standing nearly 40 feet tall with wings that could blot out the sun. Its body was covered in scales that seemed to absorb light, making it appear as a living shadow. Burning red eyes glowed like stars in the darkness of its face, and razor-sharp claws extended from hands that could crush a starship. When it opened its mouth, rows of teeth gleamed like polished daggers. "The nightmare beast of Kethmore," Vextar announced, and several council members actually stepped back from the hologram despite knowing it was just a projection. "Our ancestors discovered this creature on a dead world at the edge of known space over 1,000 years ago." The creature in the hologram moved slightly, turning its massive head as if searching for prey. Even though it was just a recording, the beast's presence filled the room with a sense of dread that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. This was not just a large predator. This was something that existed to inspire fear itself. General Croth had heard stories about the beast, but he had never seen detailed images before. "The psychological warfare reports," he said quietly. "Every species that has encountered this creature has surrendered within days." "Exactly," Vextar confirmed, his smile growing wider. "The beast does not need to destroy cities or kill millions of people. Its very presence drives entire populations to madness. The fear it creates is so intense that civilized beings lose the ability to think rationally. They become paralyzed with terror, unable to fight, unable to flee, unable to do anything except beg for mercy. The hologram showed historical records of the beast's previous deployments. World after world had fallen to its psychological assault. Proud warrior races had thrown down their weapons and surrendered rather than face the creature's terrifying presence. Advanced civilizations had abandoned their home worlds entirely, fleeing into deep space to escape the nightmare that haunted their dreams. No species has ever withstood its assault, Vextar continued. The humans think they are brave because they have won a few small battles against conventional forces. But they have never faced true, primordial terror made manifest. He gestured toward the star map showing human colonies. We will deploy the beast near their largest settlement, New Terra. The colony has over 2 million inhabitants, including families with children. When the beast appears, their terror will spread through their communication networks to every human world. Within days, maybe hours, they will be begging us to take their colonies in exchange for calling off the creature. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. No massive fleets, no costly battles, no years of grinding warfare. Just one ancient creature that would break the human spirit so completely that they would never again dare to challenge Zephyrian authority. The beast would be transported to the edge of human space and released, free to spread its psychological poison among the unsuspecting colonists. General Croth began preparing the deployment orders as Vextar dismissed the council. Within hours, the ancient transport systems were activated, and the nightmare beast of Kethmore was loaded into a specially shielded cargo ship. The crew worked quickly and quietly, none of them wanting to spend more time than necessary near the creature, even while it was contained. As the transport ship jumped into hyperspace, carrying its terrifying cargo toward human territory, Vextar stood alone in his command chamber and smiled. Soon, the human expansion would end, and the galaxy would remember why the Zephyrian Empire was feared throughout the stars. The beast's otherworldly roar would echo through human space, and their civilization would crumble before a fear older than their species. Dr. Kim Hyun sat quietly in her small laboratory on New Terra, carefully examining tiny pieces of coral under her microscope. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows as she made notes about the strange patterns she had discovered in the samples. These corals were unlike anything found on Earth, with colors that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of light. She was so focused on her work that she almost missed the first warning sign. The emergency siren started as a low hum, then quickly rose to a piercing wail that could be heard across the entire colony. Kim Hyun looked up from her microscope, confused. The colony had not had a real emergency in over 3 years. Most of the time, the sirens were just used for monthly tests that everyone ignored. Outside her window, she could see people running in the streets. Some were heading toward their homes, but many more were running toward the center of town. This was strange behavior for an emergency. Usually, people ran away from danger, not toward it. She could hear excited shouting and what sounded like cheering, which made no sense at all. The colony's defense grid had detected something massive entering their atmosphere. The automated systems were designed to track any object larger than a small ship, and whatever was coming down from space was enormous. The computers calculated its size and speed, sending warnings to every screen and communication device in the colony. But the warnings seemed almost unnecessary because the thing was big enough to see with the naked eye. A dark shadow began to cover the afternoon sun. It started small, like a cloud passing overhead, but it kept growing larger and larger. Kim Hyun pressed her face to the window and looked up at the sky. What she saw made her forget all about her coral samples. The creature descending toward their colony was like nothing she had ever seen in any biology textbook. It was massive, easily the size of a large building, with wings that stretched out so far they seemed to touch the horizon. Its body was covered in scales that looked like polished black stone, reflecting the sunlight in strange ways that hurt to look at directly. As it came closer, she could make out more details that should have terrified her. The beast had a long neck like an ancient dinosaur, but its head was shaped differently than any extinct reptile. Its eyes glowed bright red like hot coals in a fire, and they seemed to look right through anything they focused on. When it opened its mouth, she could see rows of teeth that were each longer than her arm. Its claws looked sharp enough to cut through steel, and when it landed in the central plaza, the ground shook so hard that books fell off the shelves in her lab. Kim Hyun grabbed her research equipment and ran outside, her scientific mind already racing with questions. This was the discovery of a lifetime, maybe the discovery of the century. A completely unknown species, clearly intelligent based on its controlled landing, and unlike anything in the fossil record of any known world. The central plaza was usually a quiet place where families came to eat lunch and children played on the playground equipment. Now it was packed with hundreds of people, all staring up at the creature that stood in the middle of the square. The beast was even more impressive up close, standing at least 30 feet tall with its head held high and its wings spread wide in what was clearly meant to be an intimidating display. But instead of running away in terror, the crowd was getting bigger by the minute. People were pulling out their phones and cameras, taking pictures and recording videos from every possible angle. Kim Hyun could hear excited conversations all around her as she pushed through the crowd. "Holy crap, look at the size of that thing," someone shouted from near the front of the crowd. "It's like something out of a movie." Park Min, the colony's chief engineer, was already holding up his camera and recording everything. He was known for documenting every interesting event in the colony, from new building constructions to unusual weather patterns. This was definitely going to be his most popular video. "Is it some kind of dragon?" he called out to anyone who might know. "I mean, it has wings and breathes, so maybe it's like the dragons from old Earth stories?" Kim Hyun pushed past him, carrying her portable scanner and sample collection kit. Her training as a marine biologist had taught her to observe first and theorize later, but she could not help feeling excited about the possibilities. This creature could revolutionize their understanding of evolution and biology. "Everyone stay back. I need to document this," she called out, though she noticed that very few people were actually listening to her. The crowd kept getting closer to the creature, and some brave individuals were already within 20 feet of its massive claws. Notice the wing membrane structure. Definitely not Earth-based evolution. She began taking readings with her equipment, noting the creature's body temperature, the electromagnetic field it seemed to generate, and the unusual sound frequencies it was producing. Everything about it suggested a biology that had developed completely separately from anything on Earth or the other known inhabited worlds. The creature itself seemed confused by the reaction it was receiving. Its massive head turned slowly from side to side, red eyes blinking as it tried to understand what was happening. This was clearly not the response it had expected. The beast had arrived with its wings spread wide and its mouth open in what should have been a terrifying display of power, but the humans were not acting terrified at all. Instead, they were treating it like some kind of amazing discovery. People were discussing its possible species classification, debating whether it was more reptilian or avian in nature, and taking detailed photographs of every visible feature. Some were even starting to argue about whether its scales were actually black or just very dark blue. The creature let out a roar that should have sent every human running in panic. The sound was deep and powerful, like thunder mixed with the growl of some prehistoric predator. It echoed off the buildings around the plaza and could probably be heard for miles in every direction. But instead of screaming and fleeing, the crowd began to applaud. People cheered and whistled as if they had just witnessed an amazing performance. Some shouted, "Do it again," and "That was awesome." The creature's roar, meant to inspire absolute terror and break the human spirit, had instead been received like entertainment. Within minutes of the creature's arrival, social media feeds across human space began exploding with photos and videos. The hashtag #BeastWatch started trending as people shared the images and discussed what they were seeing. News reports began broadcasting live from the scene, and scientists from other colonies started making travel arrangements to come study this incredible discovery. The nightmare beast of Kethmore, ancient weapon of psychological warfare, found itself in the completely unprecedented situation of being treated like a tourist attraction. Its confusion was visible to everyone watching as it tilted its massive head and blinked its burning red eyes, clearly trying to figure out why these small creatures were not running away in terror. For 3 days, the massive creature had remained in the central plaza of New Terra Colony, and the humans had shown no signs of the terror that should have consumed them by now. Instead, they had set up viewing areas with comfortable chairs and even small food stands selling snacks to the growing crowds of curious observers. The beast stood like a living statue in the middle of the square, occasionally moving its head to watch the strange little beings that surrounded it, but otherwise remaining perfectly still. Dr. Kim Hyun had been giving daily presentations about her preliminary findings to anyone interested in learning more about their unexpected visitor. She had discovered that the creature's body temperature was much higher than any Earth animal, and that it seemed to generate its own electromagnetic field. Her portable scanners had detected complex brain activity that suggested high intelligence, though the creature had not yet shown any obvious signs of trying to communicate. On this particular afternoon, Dr. Kim Hyun was explaining her theories about the creature's possible origins to a group of about 50 colonists who had gathered in the shade of a nearby building. She had prepared slides showing the creature's unique bone structure, which appeared to be much lighter than it should be for something so large, possibly explaining how it could fly despite its enormous size. Song-yi sat in the front row with her 8-year-old son Lee Jun, trying to pay attention to the presentation while keeping one eye on the boy. Jun was naturally curious about everything, and the presence of a real live dragon-like creature in their town was the most exciting thing that had ever happened in his young life. He had been asking questions about the beast for 3 straight days, most of which his mother could not answer. The bone density measurements suggest that this creature evolved on a world with much lower gravity than Earth, Dr. Kim Hyun was saying, pointing to her data charts. This would explain how something this large could achieve flight. On their home world, they might have weighed only a fraction of what they weigh here. Jun was trying to listen, but his attention kept wandering to the creature itself. From where he sat, he could see its massive head and the way its red eyes seemed to watch everything that happened around it. The beast looked sad to him, though he could not explain why he thought so. Maybe it was the way its head hung slightly lower than it had on the first day, or the way it did not spread its wings anymore. While his mother was focused on Dr. Kim Hyun's explanation of evolutionary biology, Jun quietly slipped away from his chair. He still had half of his lunch sandwich in his backpack, a simple creation of bread, cheese, and some of the local vegetables that grew well in New Terra's soil. His mother had packed it for him that morning, but he had been too excited to eat much. The crowd was large enough that Jun could move through it without being noticed immediately. Most of the adults were paying attention to the presentation, and the few children present were sitting with their parents. Jun made his way slowly toward the center of the plaza, where the creature stood like a mountain of living shadow. Up close, the beast was even more impressive than it appeared from a distance. Its scales were not completely black as they seemed from far away, but were actually very dark blue and green, with an oily shine that made colors shift across its surface. Each scale was larger than Jun's hand, and they overlapped in perfect patterns that reminded him of the fish he had seen in the colony's aquarium. The creature's red eyes noticed his approach immediately, and its massive head turned to focus on the small human walking toward it. Jun felt a moment of nervousness, but it was mixed with excitement rather than fear. He had always been good with animals, and something about this creature reminded him of the large dogs that some colonists kept as pets. They could look scary to people who did not know them, but they were usually gentle and friendly once you got to know them. "Hey big guy," Jun said softly as he came within a few feet of the beast. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his sandwich, holding it up so the creature could see it. "You look hungry." The nightmare beast stared down at the tiny human child with complete bewilderment. In over 1,000 years of existence, no being had ever approached it without showing signs of terror. Most creatures ran away screaming when they saw it, and even the bravest warriors had trembled with fear when forced to be in its presence. But this small human was walking toward it voluntarily, speaking in a gentle voice and offering it food. The beast lowered its massive head cautiously, moving very slowly so as not to frighten the child. Its red eyes studied Jun's face, looking for any sign of the fear that it was supposed to inspire. Instead, it saw only curiosity and what appeared to be kindness. This was completely outside its experience and it was not sure how to respond. Jun held the sandwich higher, close enough that the creature could smell it. The beast had not eaten in several days, having expected to be deployed for only a short psychological warfare mission before being recalled to its containment facility. The food smelled strange but appealing, with scents it had never encountered before. Very gently, using the same delicate precision it might use to handle a fragile egg, the creature took the sandwich from Jun's small hand. Its teeth were designed for tearing flesh, but it managed to eat the simple meal without destroying it completely. The flavors were new and pleasant, unlike the processed military rations it was usually given during its brief periods of activity. Jun giggled with delight as the enormous creature ate his sandwich. "You're not scary at all," he said, reaching up to pat the beast's snout. The scales felt warm and smooth under his small hand. "You're just lonely, aren't you?" The beast had indeed been lonely for centuries. Between its deployments as a weapon, it was kept in isolation, with no contact with other living beings except for the Zephyrian handlers who feared it too much to provide any real interaction. It had intelligence enough to understand its situation, but no way to change it. This small human's gentle touch was the first kind contact it had experienced in its long existence. Dr. Kim Hyun's voice trailed off in the middle of her sentence as she noticed that the creature was making a new sound. It was low and rumbling like distant thunder, but it had a quality that suggested contentment rather than threat. The beast was purring, much like the large cats that lived in Earth's nature preserves, but deeper and more resonant. Within minutes, the entire crowd had noticed what was happening. Jun stood next to the massive creature, gently stroking its snout while it purred with what could only be described as happiness. The sight was so unexpected and touching that people began taking pictures and videos, sharing them immediately with friends and family on other worlds. By evening, colonists were bringing food offerings to the creature. Someone had set up comfortable cushions and blankets in the plaza, creating a resting area where the beast could lie down. Families with children began establishing what they jokingly called beast parks, safe viewing areas where people could observe and interact with their unexpected visitor without getting in each other's way. The creature, which the colonists had decided to name Shadow, after an online vote, began showing remarkable intelligence. It learned to respond to simple commands like sit and stay, though it was so large that watching it sit was like watching a building settle into place. It even began playing gentle games with the children, carefully moving small objects with its claws or lowering its head so that brave youngsters could climb onto its neck. High above the planet's surface, hidden behind advanced cloaking technology, Zephyrian observation ships watched in complete horror as their ultimate psychological weapon rolled over onto its back so that a group of kindergartners could rub its belly. The children's teacher, Choi Do-eun, supervised the activity with the same calm attention she would give to any other playground game, occasionally reminding the children to be gentle with their new friend. Commander Vextar received these reports with growing disbelief and rage. The weapon that had broken entire civilizations was now being treated as a pet by human children. Instead of inspiring terror, it was inspiring affection. Instead of driving the humans to madness, it was bringing them joy and wonder. The psychological warfare that was supposed to end the human expansion had instead become the beginning of something completely unprecedented in galactic history. Shadow had found a new purpose, and the humans had found a friend they never expected to have. The videos from New Terra spread across human space like wildfire. Within hours of Lee Jun feeding Shadow his sandwich, the footage was being watched on every human colony, mining station, and research outpost in known space. People could not believe what they were seeing, a massive creature that looked like something from ancient mythology, peacefully interacting with human children and purring like a giant cat. On the mining world of Kepler 442, engineer Yoon Tae gathered his co-workers around his tablet during their lunch break. The mining facility was usually a quiet place where nothing exciting ever happened, just the steady work of extracting valuable minerals from the planet's rocky surface. The most entertainment they usually got was watching old movies on their personal devices or playing card games in the recreation room. "Look at this," Yoon Tae said, showing his friends the latest video from New Terra. "The kid is actually teaching it to play fetch. Watch this part where the dragon brings back the ball." His co-workers crowded around the small screen, laughing and pointing at the massive creature gently carrying a playground ball in its mouth. The beast was so large that the ball looked like a marble in comparison, but it moved with incredible care to avoid damaging the toy or hurting any of the children playing nearby. "That thing could probably eat a whole spaceship," said Park Jae, one of the younger miners. "But look how gentle it is with those kids. It's like it knows exactly how fragile they are." The group was so focused on watching the videos that they almost missed the proximity alarms when they started sounding. The mining facility's detection systems were designed to track incoming ships and large objects, warning the workers of any potential dangers from space. Usually, the alarms meant a supply ship was arriving with food and equipment, or occasionally a transport bringing new workers to the facility. But this alarm sounded different, more urgent and continuous than the usual brief signal that announced scheduled arrivals. Through the windows of the break room, they could see other workers stopping their activities and looking up at the sky with expressions of confusion and concern. "Another one," someone shouted from outside. "There's another dragon coming down." Yoon Tae and his friends rushed outside to see what was happening. High above them, a dark shape was descending through the atmosphere, its massive wings spread wide as it controlled its descent toward their facility. The creature looked almost identical to Shadow from the videos, though perhaps slightly smaller and with scales that seemed more blue than black. The miners watched in fascination rather than fear as the second nightmare beast landed in the open area near their main facility. The ground shook with the impact, but the creature immediately folded its wings and began making the same deep, rumbling purr that they had heard in Shadow's videos. It was clearly seeking the same kind of attention and acceptance that its companion had found on New Terra. "It wants to be petted too," Park Jae said with amazement. "It's like it watched the videos and decided it wanted some human friends of its own." Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of human colonies throughout known space. On the agricultural world of Haven, a nightmare beast landed in the middle of a wheat field and began following the farming equipment like a curious pet. On the research station orbiting Proxima 7, another creature arrived and began gently tapping on the observation windows with its claws, clearly wanting to interact with the scientists inside. Dr. Kim Hyun, who had become the galaxy's leading expert on nightmare beast behavior almost overnight, received emergency communications from colony after colony reporting new arrivals. Each creature displayed the same peaceful, attention-seeking behavior that Shadow had shown. They were not attacking or trying to inspire fear. Instead, they seemed to be actively seeking out human contact and companionship. Working with teams of linguists and computer specialists, Dr. Kim Hyun's research group had developed translation devices that could interpret the creatures' complex vocalizations. The breakthrough came when they realized that the beasts were using a form of telepathic communication combined with sound frequencies that were below normal human hearing range. The first successful translation session revealed something that changed everything. The creatures were not just seeking friendship, they were also sharing information. Each beast that arrived at a human colony brought with it detailed knowledge about Zephyrian military operations, including fleet positions, weapon capabilities, patrol schedules, and tactical plans. Captain Jang Ho of the Human Defense Force could hardly believe the intelligence reports he was receiving. "They're giving us complete fleet movements, weapon specifications, everything," he told his staff during an emergency briefing. "It's like having the enemy's entire battle plan handed to us on a silver platter." The creatures, when asked through the translation devices what they wanted to be called, had chosen the name Earth's Guardians. They explained that they had spent centuries being used as weapons against their will, forced to terrorize innocent beings when all they really wanted was companionship and purpose. The humans had shown them kindness for the first time in their long existence, and they wanted to repay that kindness by protecting their new friends. The Guardians took their new role very seriously. They established patrol patterns around each colony, using their enhanced senses to detect approaching ships or other threats long before human technology could pick them up. Their early warning capabilities were so advanced that they made most electronic security systems seem primitive by comparison. On New Terra, Lee Jun had officially become Shadow's caretaker, though his mother Song-Yi made sure he understood the enormous responsibility that came with caring for such a massive creature. Shadow had learned to play several games with the children, including a modified version of hide-and-seek where the beast would close its eyes and count while the children found hiding places around the plaza. The sight of a 30-foot-tall dragon carefully counting to 10 while a group of 8-year-olds scattered to hide behind trees and playground equipment had become one of the most popular videos in human space. Shadow would then pretend to have difficulty finding the children, even when they were hiding in obvious places, acting surprised and delighted when he discovered them. Song-Yi found herself coordinating with colony leaders across human space to establish formal protocols for human guardian partnerships. The creatures needed proper care, including regular feeding schedules and appropriate resting areas. They also needed to be integrated into each colony's defense systems and communication networks so they could effectively serve their chosen role as protectors. The transformation was complete. What had been intended as weapons of terror had become beloved guardians and companions. Each guardian formed strong emotional bonds with their adopted human families and communities, showing loyalty and affection that surprised even Dr. Kim Hyun's research teams. The Zephyrian Empire watched in growing horror as their ultimate weapons not only failed to terrorize the humans, but actually began providing military intelligence to their enemies. The creatures that had once been their most feared assets were now actively working against them, and there seemed to be nothing they could do to stop it. The pack mentality that had once made the nightmare beasts effective as coordinated weapons had now turned them into an organized force dedicated to protecting humanity. They communicated with each other across vast distances, sharing information and coordinating their protective activities in ways that made them even more effective as guardians than they had ever been as instruments of terror. Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship as the massive Zephyrian invasion fleet prepared to emerge from hyperspace. Around him, dozens of other warships hung in the darkness between dimensions, their crews ready for what should have been an easy victory. The plan was simple: arrive at human space, accept their surrender, and begin the process of claiming their colonies for the Empire. The Nightmare Beast deployment should have broken human morale completely by now. Vextar had expected to receive surrender messages within days of the creature's arrival at New Terra. Instead, he had received only silence from his reconnaissance teams and increasingly disturbing reports from the few observers who remained in position around human worlds. "Prepare for hyperspace exit," Vextar commanded, his crimson eyes fixed on the tactical display. "All ships maintain formation. The humans should be ready to surrender unconditionally." The fleet emerged from hyperspace in a coordinated formation that had been practiced for months. 57 warships materialized simultaneously around the New Terra system, their weapons powered and ready for any resistance the broken human forces might still be able to mount. Vextar expected to see a world in chaos, its population hiding in shelters while their leaders begged for mercy. Instead, his sensors immediately detected something that made no sense at all. Massive energy signatures were surrounding each human colony, signatures that perfectly matched the biometric readings of nightmare beasts. Not just one creature but dozens of them, all apparently active and healthy throughout human space. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking with nervousness, "the humans appear to have domesticated our weapons." Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he stared at the readings. "That is impossible. Run the scans again." The second scan confirmed what the first had shown. The nightmare beasts were not only alive and active, but they were moving in coordinated patterns around human settlements. Their energy signatures suggested they were in perfect health and showing signs of the high activity levels that usually occurred only during combat situations. "Show me visual confirmation," Vextar demanded. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying images from their long-range surveillance systems. What Vextar saw there challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare, psychology, and the nature of fear itself. Human children were playing games with creatures that should have driven entire populations insane with terror. Families were having picnics in parks where nightmare beasts rested peacefully in the shade of trees. But even worse than the peaceful scenes were the military preparations. The beasts were wearing custom-fitted armor that bore human military insignia and rank markings. Sophisticated communication arrays had been mounted on their backs, allowing them to coordinate with human forces in real time. They moved with the precision of trained soldiers, but soldiers who had chosen their own side in the conflict. "This is impossible," Vextar snarled, his voice carrying the rage and bewilderment of a commander whose ultimate weapon had not only failed, but had actually joined the enemy. The first wave of Zephyrian assault ships moved toward New Terra, expecting to face desperate human defenders using primitive technology. Instead, they encountered coordinated resistance unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. The Guardian beasts, now numbering over 50 across human space, fought alongside human forces with tactical precision that impressed even their enemies. Shadow, the first beast to be befriended by the humans, had become the unofficial leader of the Guardian forces. He led a squadron of human fighter ships piloted by volunteers from New Terra Colony, including Li Jun's older brother Kim Woo, who had trained specifically to work with his family's adopted guardian. The sight of human ships flying in perfect formation with a massive dragon-like creature was both beautiful and terrifying to witness. The battle coordination was seamless. Dr. Kim Hyun, who had been promoted to Chief Xenobiological Advisor for the Human Defense Forces, worked from New Terra's command center to direct the combined Human-Guardian alliance. Her research had given her detailed knowledge of Guardian capabilities and communication methods, making her invaluable in coordinating their defensive efforts. "Target their command ship," she instructed Shadow through the translation interface they had developed. "You know where their bridge is located from your time with them." Shadow's response came through the communication system as a series of complex sounds that the translation matrix converted to human language. "Understood. Leading attack formation to primary target. Guardian Units 7 and 12 will provide support from flanking positions." The Zephyrian fleet found itself facing opponents who knew their ships better than they knew themselves. The Guardians provided detailed intelligence about weak points in Zephyrian armor, optimal attack angles, and the exact locations of critical systems. It was like fighting an enemy who had blueprints to all of their equipment. But the military defeat was only part of the Zephyrians' growing humiliation. Their other psychological weapons, deployed in desperation as the battle turned against them, proved equally useless against human adaptability. The fear-inducing shadow wraiths, ethereal creatures designed to haunt their victims with nightmares, were adopted by human families as emotional support spirits. Children gave them names like Smokey and Whisper, and taught them to play hide-and-seek. Terror-inducing plants that produced sounds designed to drive listeners to madness were carefully cultivated in human botanical gardens. The colonists discovered that when properly cared for, the plants produced complex harmonies that were actually quite pleasant to listen to. Musicians began incorporating the sounds into their compositions, creating a new genre of music that became incredibly popular across human space. Even the Zephyrian sonic weapons, which generated frequencies meant to cause psychological breakdown, were turned into entertainment. Human DJs began sampling the sounds and mixing them into dance tracks that topped the music charts on dozens of worlds. Vextar watched in complete bewilderment as his invasion force was systematically defeated by an alliance he could never have imagined. Worse than the military defeat was the psychological impact of seeing every weapon his empire had developed turned into a source of joy and companionship for their enemies. "Retreat," he finally ordered, his voice heavy with defeat and confusion. "All ships withdraw to hyperspace immediately." The Zephyrian fleet began its hasty withdrawal, but in their panic to escape, they abandoned another dozen psychological warfare creatures that had been held in reserve. These failed weapons immediately began seeking out the nearest human settlements, drawn by the same desire for companionship and acceptance that had motivated their predecessors. On New Terra, Li Jun sat in the central plaza with Shadow, watching the alien fleet disappear into hyperspace. The massive guardian's head rested gently in the boy's lap while he scratched behind the creature's ear ridges, a spot that always made Shadow purr with contentment. "I think you scared them away, buddy," Jun said with a smile, looking up at his enormous friend. Shadow's response was a deep, rumbling purr that sounded like distant thunder mixed with complete satisfaction. Across human space, the newest members of humanity's extended family were settling in for their evening routines of belly rubs, snacks, and the strange, wonderful experience of being loved instead of feared. The Zephyrian Empire's ultimate psychological warfare campaign had ended not in human surrender, but in the creation of the most unusual and effective defensive alliance in galactic history. The creatures that had once terrorized entire civilizations now spent their days playing with children, protecting colonies, and discovering what it meant to be part of a family. In the end, the humans had done what they always did when faced with something new and potentially dangerous. They had approached it with curiosity, kindness, and an irrepressible desire to make friends. The galaxy would never be quite the same again.